Now, time to take a look at the headlines on the papers this morning with Dr. Constance spearheading this analysis.
Good morning, Benga.
Good morning.
Good morning, Yolanda.
Dr. Constance, he forgot to mention the red carpet.
And the old one. And the endless list.
Something is wrong today.
Nothing is wrong. Guys, let's just leave that alone, okay? We have more important things to talk about today.
All right.
All right, good to see you guys. If you're just
Likewise.
joining us this morning, hello there and welcome to the program. We'll be looking at the stories that are shaping the agenda for you in the paper review. This morning, across multiple newspapers, there's a groundswell of opposition against the National Assembly in regard to the Electoral Amendment Act. Insecurity remains a top national story that many titles are highlighting, with the president promising action. Some outlets have a mix of stories on the economy, infrastructure news, and governance critique. So let's start with This Day. This Day leads with a report that a coalition of civil society organizations are warning that the 2027 elections may be compromised. On insecurity, President Tinubu confirms that terrorism is giving him and Nigerians sleepless nights, with a promise that the country will overcome. On the window, Access Bank's acquisition of South Africa's Bidvest Bank falls through due to regulatory hurdles. Vanguard focuses on the Electoral Act, with the Senate saying it's open to criticism and will resolve that matter today. It also says Nigeria will continue to borrow to fund 25.91 trillion naira budget deficit. Daily Sun reports on the transmission of results saga, with Kuka Center, Yaga Africa, others demanding mandatory result transmission. Even the Nigerian Guild of Editors is urging the National Assembly to adopt mandatory transmission. Leadership, NCC begins telecom policy overhaul, seeks lower right-of-way fees as well as streamlined taxes. First Lady Oluremi Tinubu is quoted as saying that U.S. intervention in Nigeria is a blessing. Daily Independent has gone with an entirely different topic for its lead story. Here, experts warn that Nigeria risks sliding into avoidable food crisis as rising input costs may reverse food security gains. 2026 budget with 15.09 trillion naira debt service, 25.27 trillion naira deficit, Senate vows deep scrutiny. Here's a photo of Mr. Peter Obi, who joined that civil society organizations and activists at the National Assembly to protect the electronic transmission of votes. We have it there in Daily Independent. Moving on to the Punch, Senate reconvenes today as Electoral Act triggers uproar. New Telegraph leads with President Tinubu's comment that Nigeria is at crossroads, facing structural and macroeconomic challenges, and terrorists abduct 9 worshippers during vigil in Benue State. The Guardian writes that Nigeria's internet speed has slipped, ranking 85th globally. And Rivers crisis, Fubara Wike again meet the president in Abuja. Finally, the Senate will harmonize Electoral Acts today, the paper reports. Moving on to the international newspapers, Daily Mirror. Many papers are highlighting internal party strain and doubts about Sir Keir Starmer's future as Prime Minister. Several titles emphasize rising pressure from within Labour, with critics suggesting Starmer may be weakened, although his cabinet has come out in full support. So Daily Mirror front page quotes King Charles as saying the royal family will help the police in investigations of the Epstein case, in which his brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is hit by more claims. The Sun also features the same promise by King Charles on this matter. Our newspaper looks at the end game for Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer in this whole saga. Daily Express highlights call by Scottish leader for Starmer to resign. In the Daily Telegraph, West Streeton is accused of helping Starmer hang on to power in these turbulent times, even as pressure mounts on him to throw in the towel. The Times covers Starmer's cabinet falling in line to support him, giving him a lifeline for the time being. A cabinet bounced into giving PM stay of execution, says Daily Mail headline. We have the same story in The Guardian, with Starmer not mincing words at all. The Prime Minister is not prepared to walk away, quotes this paper. Financial Times, U.S. Embassy denies top executives visas over petty offenses going back to the 1970s. Metro.co.uk finally questions how long Starmer will cling on to power. Now let's return to see what the stories mean for everyday citizens. This day newspaper. Here we have a coalition of civil society organizations that are warning that the 2027 election is in jeopardy. This explains the protest yesterday at the National Assembly. We had Mr. Peter Obi, some activists and other people occupying the National Assembly over the Senate's rejection of real-time electronic transmission of votes. They have promised to continue the protest until the lawmakers change course. And we know the Senate will hold an emergency session today on this same matter. It will be difficult for the Senate to get away with this one, it seems. The general belief is that lawmakers are bent on protecting a system that gives politicians room to manipulate outcomes. Wenger.
I think once again, the narrative recaptures a group of people in an enduring bid to find a voice in the shaping of their political future. And the country is at this threshold. It's a serious concern that the right of the citizen is once again about to be thrown at the brink of a big gamble. What are we talking about? We are talking about transparency in our electoral process. We are talking about the need for real-time transmission of electoral results, and which is not too much. They've come with the powers that be, the Senate, that come with that excuse, that lame excuse that the nation does not have the capacity to transmit technologically. And I beg to differ. Every project in life has a risk threshold. Are you going to say because there was a Sesoliso air crash in 2000 and what? Because of that you won't fly a plane again? Are you going to say that the auto crash statistics in Nigeria, that we've recorded some auto crash or real derail, that we're not going to ride on train again? I think that is a negative logic, and it's an attempt to ambush our political future. And I think that the people have stood up to these people. Remember that this system, the real transmission of electoral results, was adopted during the Osun election, and that was what gave increase the voter participation and the voter confidence in the build-up to the 2023 elections. So what is involved in this uploading to the IRF portal is just to forward something as if you're forwarding is a list of the broadband demand that this process demands. Is just to upload something into the IRF portal, and I beg to differ that narrative that it's like an ambush excuse. It's like an alibi to deny the people the power to elect their leaders. And I think that this should be resisted with every strength, every muscle that the people have to show that the real power belongs to the citizens and not the Senate.
I mean, the protest at the National Assembly yesterday, it was already started. When you think about it, it just signals the level of frustration of Nigerians about what is going on in this country in regard to politics, in regard to elections, in regard to life in general and what people are facing on a daily basis. The protest did not seem robust. However, it seems this is the beginning. I listened to the SDP presidential candidate in the 2023 election, talking yesterday. And what he said was that what you saw at the National Assembly yesterday was just a fashion parade and a warm-up. In essence, what he's saying that there is more coming, and that you can regard that as a warning. Politicians is saying they should regard that as a warning that Nigerians this time around are not giving up on this. But a couple of things could happen. It could deepen distrust in the electoral system, which is already, a complicated system. It could potentially discourage voter participation. We know that at every election, more and more people are not voting, and that is not good for a democracy, because if you're not involved, if you're not participating, then you have no right to, to condemn what is happening. You have to be really involved. If you are, then the level of manipulation will be a bit less than when there's no one at the polls at all.
Oh, no, Dr.
And then finally, it could give rise to tensions ahead of the elections, and that is not a situation that you want. While lawmakers say there's weak infrastructure capabilities to do what they are being asked to do, real-time transmission of votes, many voters do not want to hear that at all.
Many people don't want to hear that, but also let's not forget the facts that are staring us in the face, because both sides seem to have somewhat credible arguments if you look at it in an analytical way. First of all, remember we spoke about how most of these votes are in the rural areas, and connectivity is really an issue. Look, I'm not standing on any side at this point, because even within myself, I am divided with which opinion to stand with, because as much as there is so much credibility in the fact that people need this level of transparency. Look, Nigeria has gone through so much, especially in the past couple of months, and right now, this is the last thing that we need. That level of transparency with the credibility of voting that's coming up is very pertinent. But our elections are less than a year away. And with that, is that enough time to put a system in place that will be able to yield these desired results? I know that one of the arguments that was brought up was the fact that, yes, the connectivity issues in the rural areas. Will this not create more problems in the future, such as, if we're not able to have them in real time, what happens with these votes? This is a presidential election. This is not just, run by the mill. People want to actually have their candidates win, and will this bring the yielded results?
I feel your sentiments, Yolanda, but the issue is that mortgaging the transparency of the forthcoming election will bring in more pain and more risk threshold. One, this was the system adopted during the Osun election, and that was what brought the Gen Z generation into the voting space, into our electoral space. This was also used during the National Assembly election. So what has happened? And due to some controversial circumstance, it was not used at the presidential election. So
okay, so the thing is that we give a lot of excuses in this country.
Right.
I remember way back in 2013, they were asking for real-time electronic transmission of results. So this is not new. If we want to do it, we can do it. And also, I remember one of the times that President Goodluck Jonathan was the president, that was at the height of Boko Haram insurgency. And the belief was that elections cannot hold in those areas where insurgents have literally taken over. What the president did was he postponed the elections for a few months, and he cleared everything, and the elections took place.
Indeed.
So let's stop giving them excuses. If you want to do something, you find a way around it. Well, that's the sense that people get. Yeah. Let's stay with this day. President Tinubu confirms that terrorism is giving him and Nigerians sleepless nights, with the promise that the country will defeat the scourge. Many people will be rolling their eyes right now.
Yes.
Like, do we need the president to tell us that we have sleepless nights due to terrorism? Nigerians simply need measures that deliver results, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we've been on this conversation for so long. We need to stop actually doing the talking and move to actually doing.
yeah, I was just about saying that I share your sentiment fully on this. We've had that time just last week. The president came out to say that the killings in Kwara offends our humanity and shared value and all that. We're tired of this rhetoric.
Absolutely.
We cannot take it as a new normal that people are dying, that the nation is being turned to a killing field. We need concrete actions. And when there are obvious options, why don't you try it? It's just the same narrative of this election, this real-time transmission we're talking about.
Right.
Because some people are arguing that if you have state police that would have that intimate connection to the grassroots, the local intelligence of what's happening. So why is the president reluctant? Again, because of governors would want to use this, would want to weaponize this during for their political advantage. I think that is very, very primitive and very uncharitable to put that forward. So it means that you are putting the cat before the horse.
All right. Daily Independent this morning, the Senate laid bare the fiscal realities facing the country in 2026 with 15.09 trillion naira debt service, 25.27 trillion naira deficit against expected revenues of 33.19 trillion naira. All this was made known during the public hearing on the 2026 appropriation bill at the National Assembly, underscoring the delicate balance the government is seeking to strike between fiscal consolidation and urgent needs for growth and infrastructure development. At the hearing, the Senate issued a strong warning that the 2026 budget proposal will undergo rigorous scrutiny. They also vowed to get value for money and prioritize development. But when we go to Vanguard, if we pull that up, it's a slightly different tone. It says Nigeria will continue to borrow to fund the 25.91 trillion naira budget deficit. Chairman of the Senate Committee, Senator Olamilekon Adeolu, noted that borrowing had become unavoidable given the country's revenue constraints and development needs. With weak revenue and debt service already choking the budget, how does Senate justify borrowing? And at what point does this stop being fiscal policy and start becoming a gamble with the country's future?
I think, okay.
Yeah, once again, we are having the same conversation over and over again and bringing up the same narrative. At this point, trust has been deeply eroded. There's absolutely no public trust anymore. These pledges by the Senate have sadly become something that is meaningless. Now, all these promises of scrutiny amid rising debt servicing has become something that people simply just don't want to hear anymore, I think. Benga, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think mathematics don't lie, because the rule says the debt to GDP ratio, which should be not more than 40%. I think we are at that threshold already. And when we look at the debt servicing, which the Senate announced that it's about 15 trillion naira, to the revenue projection, which is about 33 trillion naira, we could see that the debt to revenue ratio is about 50, it's close to 50% already. So it simply shows that we are not talking rocket science. It simply shows that for each out of the revenue that we make, that 50% of it goes into debt servicing. Then to service the 2026 budget will require a 25 trillion naira to service that deficit. So the nation is running at a budget deficit. So like I grew up with this adage, evil goes borrowing, goes sorrowing. So the country economically is at a very dangerous precipice. And there is a need to, because we cannot borrow our way into growth. We need concrete industrial development. We need to do something about the power sector, and not much, unfortunately. The whole thing looks to me like a voodoo economics that the government is professing to the nation.
It just means we're running into a debt-driven survival type of government, and with weak revenue and the Senate endorsing more borrowing, the government is effectively admitting that it cannot fix its revenue problem politically.
Indeed.
And that its hands are tied and we will just have to continue doing this. It's a fiscal trap that we are in. They're talking about more taxes and all of that, but no one knows how this is going to pan out. We have those inflationary pressures that is very high and that is affecting every Nigerian today. The danger is that higher debt leads to political paralysis, and it looks like that is where we are heading, except something changes dramatically. Let's take another story from Leadership newspaper. U.S. intervention in Nigeria is a blessing, says First Lady Oluremi Tinubu. Quick thoughts on this?
Yeah, if the wife of the president thinks that what we'll call diplomatic niceties and at worst flattery changes the reality, the prevailing reality in the security sector, I think again she might need to have a second thought. The nation cannot afford to outsource its security sector. We have seen the U.S. doing is what we will call a Gestapo sting operation, which we have seen that it's never sustainable, and we know that this is not free for all. Again, this comes against the background of federal government paying lobbyists to the tune of $9 billion. That's a lot that would change a lot of reality, a lot of negative reality in the country. So we cannot afford outsource our security, because even looking at Section 14 of the Constitution, it says that security and welfare of the people are the primary responsibility of government. So that's just my humble submission.
There are two ways to look at this. In a way, it signals a quiet acceptance that domestic institutions are no longer seen as sufficient to resolve Nigeria's security problems or security crisis or governance failures. So the sense is that Nigeria is willing to trade autonomy for stability, for support from wherever. And in a way, this kind of touches on Nigeria's leadership in West Africa, because, you know, West African countries, other countries within the continent are looking at what is happening in regard to Nigeria. So politically at home, it also hands critics an opening to argue that the government is outsourcing responsibility instead of fixing its internal weaknesses, because the U.S. can only help to an extent. The majority of the problem or the solution will have to lie within Nigeria and what Nigeria is capable of doing. Having said that, we know that this fight, we cannot win it alone. However, it is the level of cooperation or level of foreign interference that we have to look at to determine how this pans out. But we also see the First Lady emerging somewhat as a figure that is being deployed diplomatically, you know, to help the government. Whether this is sanctioned at top level, it's not the issue. The issue is that it simply seems that, you know, she's been sort of now in this space of soft power positioned to help the government, to help Nigeria, you know, somewhat. We don't know how.
Yeah, but I think it's time the president appoints ambassadors to drive this thing in a more professional way, and that would project the national interest more.
Will that help?
This gamble and the trial version we are placing the nation internationally.
But do you honestly think that that will help, that will yield results?
See, if career ambassadors are deployed to, I've worked closely with career ambassadors. I know their competence, I know their intensity of training they have passed through over the years. They are the best in the world, I tell you. There is nothing that we deploy career ambassadors, even in international debate. Remember that in the build-up to the 2014 UN Security Council, we won that debate at the AU of the Nigeria needing to have a permanent seat at the Security Council. We won it even at the ECOWAS regional level. So our ambassadors, career ambassadors, are the best in the world.
Okay, you have to give them the tools that they need to work every time you appoint them, because there are always criticism to that effect. Let's take an international story, two actually. Let's go first to Iran and then the United Kingdom. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says a complete halt in its uranium enrichment is unacceptable, arguing that no one has the right to dictate Iran's behavior. Their military deployment in the region does not scare us, he said, referring to the arrival of that aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, in the Arabian Sea. Iran is currently in negotiations with the US. And in Daily Mirror, we have UK Prime Minister losing a second member of his staff, Director of Communications Tim Allen, who resigned yesterday. This is even as he gets the backing of his cabinet, chief among them being the former Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner. But the leader of the Scottish Labour Party has asked Starmer to resign.
Starmer is in the hot seat as he loses more and more of his core staff, and I can't imagine what it is like there. These are changes that we are seeing, but these are on the outside, but what is actually happening on the inside? Now, it's saying that pressures are high for Starmer to step down, but he is not prepared to walk away. And we have seen how resilient he has been over, you know, the course of his tenure. So, I mean, we look forward to how this develops, how the story develops, because Keir Starmer really is saying that he's here to stay. I think that's also on the front of the Daily Mirror. When it comes to Iran, there's been a nuclear diplomacy deadlock for the longest time between Iran and the US. You know, there's no issue with America having nuclear weapons, but when it comes to Iran or any other country, that's where the bone of contention begins to set in. So all these compliance frameworks that have holes in them, you know, we're constantly seeing how the West does not want any other country to have these nuclear weapons. So Iran standing its ground, is it worth it at the end of the day when the collateral damage is your people, your infrastructure, your cities, your country? Is it worth it at the end of the day?
It depends on the country. I mean, India has nuclear weapons. Pakistan has nuclear weapons. So many other countries in Europe have nuclear weapons.
And
so
there's grades to it. There's levels to it.
Yeah, so there's hypocrisy. No, there's
grades,
hypocrisy.
there's
So when you
levels.
say
You can't
does
compare.
Iran, it depends.
You
It
can't
depends on
compare.
their interests. So the reason why Iran insists it cannot completely stop uranium enrichment because it views enrichment as a sovereign, inalienable right under the non-proliferation treaty.
As it should be.
And to be honest, it is a matter of national pride for the country, and it strongly believes that giving it up will concede to external dictates rather than respect in its legal rights and scientific achievements, because it's not only about nuclear weapons when you're enriching uranium. But anyway, it's a complicated story. But, quickly to the UK, by rallying around the Prime Minister, some senior figures are publicly saying that they still believe in Keir Starmer, that the leadership crisis can be managed without forcing him out. It means that, this is being framed as a necessary reset for Starmer to take control again and not a collapse of confidence in him. We'll wait and see, because a couple of weeks, in politics can mean a lot.
That's right.
He's hanging on for now. We don't know how this will pan out.
How much longer he can hang on.
How much longer. All right. Those were your headlines for today.